Hey guys, welcome back to the Uncreated Light. Today I'm going to be talking about the Ecumenical Councils refute Catholicism. In my studies of the Ecumenical Councils, it is clear to me that they refute several of the Roman Catholic claims to the faith. It's not my intent to attack Catholics. I appreciate the devotion of many Catholics, and I will do my best to present this charitably with the grace of God. I will keep it as short and as brief as I can, so it's pretty much kind of an introduction level. It's not quite as in-depth. If you want some more in-depth on these councils, I definitely recommend checking out Jay Dyer or Craig Trulia. Please forgive me of any offense, and may my words be edified for the benefit of my brothers and sisters. In the name of the Trinity, amen. The First Ecumenical Council. In Canon 15, it states that bishops, priests, and deacons should remain within their jurisdictions, and those that pass from city to city will be sent back to their original place where they were ordained. This doesn't bode well for the papal doctrine of universal jurisdiction, which says the Pope can do quite the opposite of this. In the Roman Catholic Catechism, which cites Lumen Gentium 22, it states the following: "The Pope, Bishop of Rome and Peter's successor, is the perpetual invisible source and foundation of the unity both of the bishops and of the whole company of the faithful. For the Roman Pontiff, by reason of his office as Vicar of Christ and as pastor of the entire Church, has full, supreme, and universal power over the whole Church, a power which he can always exercise unhindered." Canon 15 and Lumen Gentium are in direct conflict with one another. The date of Pascha, or Easter, was also standardized at the council. Christianity celebrated the resurrection in unison until 1582, when Pope Gregory introduced the Gregorian calendar, while the East remained on the Julian calendar. Now, this may not seem like such a big deal, but we now have Pascha being celebrated completely off by the Roman Catholics. Sure, they follow all the same formulas as the council implemented, but they're not on the same calendar said council was on, meaning their dating is off and they are not in line with the defined date of Pascha. Furthermore, Rome allows uniates, who they deem as fully Catholic, which I've written on the contradictory nature of Eastern Catholicism, but this revealed yet another one. Some, not all, emphasizing again not all uniates, follow the Orthodox formula for Pascha and the revised Julian calendar system, such as the Ukrainian Greek Catholics and some Melkites, while the majority of other Catholics do not. Meaning you can be Roman Catholic and have two Pascha celebrations, implying that there are two resurrections. This is completely not in line with the Synod of Nicaea. Catholics may try to say that Orthodox do the same thing with Nativity, being different for the old and the new calendars. However, Nativity was not defined in the same way as Pascha was, with the backing of an ecumenical council. And all of Orthodoxy still adheres to Nicaea standards and celebrates in unison on the old calendar Pascha. The Second Ecumenical Council. It was called without the knowledge of the Pope, and even more so, the Roman Pontiff was not even invited. Its first president was not in communion at the time of its session with the Roman Church. Henry Perceval, 2013. This council also placed Constantinople as New Rome, second in rank among equals. The Second Ecumenical Council was held by St. Meletius, Bishop of Antioch, who died out of communion with Rome, and didn't receive Rome's ratification until a year after its conclusion, when they wrote a letter reminding Rome that they were going to be outside the church unless they ratified the council with them. This council emphatically undermines the necessity of Rome and the Pope, seeing as they were not only not there, not invited, but out of communion with St. Meletius at the time. This is the constant critique of Catholics, saying Moscow and Constantinople today are out of communion. Therefore, Orthodox are dysfunctional and have no unity. Yet this just burns back at them, citing the example of Rome out of communion in the Second Ecumenical Council, and citing the First Millennium Church in general, which saw breaks in communion with various sees while not undermining the Catholicity of the Church throughout it. Further, St. Meletius has since been canonized as a saint by the Roman Catholic Church, despite dying out of communion with Rome. This is another blatant contradiction, as Unum Sanctum says all who die outside of Rome are damned to hell. Quote, "It is absolutely necessary for salvation that every human creature be subject to the Roman Pontiff." How can a saint not have salvation? The Third Ecumenical Council. Before the third of the ecumenical synods was called to meet, Pope Celestine had already convicted Nestorius of heresy and deposed and excommunicated him. When subsequently the synod was assembled, and before the papal legates had arrived, the council met, treated Nestorius as in good standing, entirely ignoring the sentence already given by Rome, and having examined the case after summoning him 3 times to appear, that he might be heard in his own defense, proceeded to sentence Nestorius and immediately published the sentence. Henry Perceval, 2013. As mentioned by Henry Perceval, Rome was correct in its judgment of Nestorius. However, it was without the entire church, so their sentence was ignored. Ignoring the seat of Peter's judgment upon something is contrary to the Roman Catholic claims of universal supremacy, jurisdiction, and infallibility. If the church at this time believed in such, they would not have ignored Rome's ruling, as it would have been final. There would have been no point in calling the Third Ecumenical Council. The Fourth Ecumenical Council. Similar to the Third, the Fourth Council refused Rome's decisions on its basis alone, and held their own council to examine the Eutychian dispute. This council passed a canon which states, "The fathers had very properly given privileges to Old Rome as the imperial city, and that now they give the same privileges to Constantinople as the seat of the imperial government during this time." Canon 28. Roman Catholic apologists would most likely respond that Rome was declaring the correct decision, and the rest of the church was just following their lead in order to prove their papal doctrines. But again, if that were true, what is the point of the council? Or rather, wouldn't the council just ratify Rome's decision without its own hearing? Once again, Rome may have been right in their decree, but they were wrong in thinking they can act alone for the entirety of the church, which is why the church once again ignored their decrees to hold their own inquiry regarding the Eutychian matter. Constantinople, given the same privileges as Rome in Canon 28, shows there is no supremacy of Rome above the other sees, and that Rome's status was always of primacy as a first among equals. Many Roman Catholics, in my opinion, confuse and conflate primacy with supremacy. This canon was not accepted by Pope Leo due to the encroachments upon the prerogatives of his own see. However, the Council of Trullo renewed this canon of Chalcedon, of which the Seventh Ecumenical Council gave sanction to, the canons of Trullo, which is fully accepted by Rome today. Therefore, the canons affirm Constantinople has all the same privileges as Rome, and Rome accepted the Ecumenical Council that sanctioned it. Roman Catholics must either accept Rome only has a primacy, as the canons decree, and nothing more, or they are following contrary to the Ecumenical Councils. Saying Pope Leo didn't accept it manifests the same problem. The Pope and Rome disagree with all of Christendom at the time, and if they had supremacy, infallibility, indefectibility, etc., then Christendom would have followed suit in their decision, but Christendom did not. The Fifth Ecumenical Council. This council refused Pope Vigilius communion, removed his name from the diptychs, and denied any written doctrinal communication from him too. If the Pope had such authority, why would written doctrinal communication from him be denied? If you say because the Pope can err, then that would contradict Rome's doctrines of papal infallibility and indefectibility. Why would he be denied communion from the rest of the church and called a purporter of heresy of Nestorianism? This also contradicts papal dogma. The Pope's name was removed from the diptychs, and from the extracts the council stated, quote, "We will not endure to receive the spotless communion from him, nor from anyone else who does not condemn this impiety, lest we be found thus communicating with the impiety of Nestorius and Theodore." Session 7 from the extracts of the Acts of the Fifth Ecumenical Council. Constantinople too pulled the reigning pope at the time from the diptychs as a father of heresy, denying his communion of the Eucharist, clearly implicating that Pope Vigilius was teaching something close to Nestorianism. The 3 chapters were anathematized for their perpetuation of Nestorian-like beliefs, such as denying the title of the Theotokos for the Mother of God. Pope Vigilius refused to condemn them with the emperor's decision, who was trying to thwart the Monophysites, which is why Vigilius had his name removed from the diptychs and action was taken against him. Vigilius eventually ratified the decisions of the council, proving he did not have sway over the entire church. The Sixth Ecumenical Council. Pope Honorius, who was reposed at the time, is excommunicated and deemed a heretic for his role in the monothelite controversy. Monothelitism is the heresy that Christ only has one will, as opposed to the correct teaching of two wills in Christ, as defended in the works of St. Maximus the Confessor. Jesus Christ has two wills, two natures, in one person. Session 16 of the Council states, "To Honorius the heretic, anathema." Many Roman Catholic apologists are split on how to handle the problem of Honorius. They will either say he did proclaim monothelitism and was condemned, but it wasn't ex cathedra, or they will say he actually didn't proclaim monothelitism and his letters are corrupted. This latter view is simply absurd from the scholarly consensus that we have, and the former, quite frankly, is mental gymnastics to avoid the issue. Pope Honorius had his letters burned at the session, and the report to the council to the emperor states Honorius is the, quote, former bishop of Rome, and they had, quote, punished with exclusion and anathema for his role in supporting the monothelites. Henry Perceval, 2013, page 455. Meaning the Ecumenical Councils deposed a pope and is therefore above any pope. Apologists of Rome will say the conciliar structure is deficient, then ignore its constant use since the beginning, and ignore the fact that they themselves use a conciliar structure in deposing a pope, just like the Sixth Ecumenical Council did. Quote, Pope Leo II confirmed the decrees of the council and expressly says that he too anathematized Honorius, Henry Perceval, 2013. Additionally, a pope affirmed the condemnation of another pope, under the papal doctrines which one is right. Both are supposedly the chair of Peter, proclaiming different things. The Council of Trullo is often used as supplementing for the Fifth and Sixth Ecumenical Councils, as these two did not actually have any canons of their own when they were called. So to dive into Trullo, which is ratified at the Seventh Ecumenical Council, Canon 6 states that priests cannot marry after ordination, but beforehand are free to do so. This is the practice of the Eastern Orthodox Church. However, the Roman Church does not adhere to this in allowing married clergy before ordination. We see the most prominent example of this in the Gospels, where Peter was married before his call from Christ. He was not denied his calling due to the marriage beforehand. Canon 28 states clerics should not appeal beyond their sees and should contact the neighboring bishop. This canon is contrary to the Roman Catholic claims of universal jurisdiction and authority. Even stranger, this council with these canons was received by Rome, putting it in direct contradictory claims. It is fair to note that Pope Sergius refused to sign the Council of Trullo at first, but Rome did eventually affirm it. But again, the entirety of the Church declined the Pope's decision and overruled him, and the Pope eventually submitted to the conciliar decisions of the Church. The Seventh Ecumenical Council. The Pope had nothing to do with the calling of this council. Once again, Nicaea II affirmed the canons of the Council of Trullo, which directly contradicts Roman Catholicism. Noted by St. Theodore in 826, Rome did not consider this an ecumenical council. Quote, only as a provincial synod. Our countrymen acted thus for the purpose of more easily bringing back the heretics by persuading them that it was an ecumenical council. Henry Perceval, 2013, page 720. It was once again the East, for the second time in history, informing Rome that a council was actually ecumenical. The Eighth Ecumenical Council. Curious to note, for some, Eastern Orthodox have 9 ecumenical councils, the eighth one being the Fourth Council of Constantinople, held in 879, which was accepted by Rome for 300 years, before revoking it afterwards. This council specifically forbade the use of the Filioque and any change to the Nicene Creed, which clearly contradicts and poses a problem for Catholics. In 1, they changed the creed, and 2, they accepted a council as ecumenical for 300 years and then changed their mind. The council met the requirements of ecumenical. It was signed by the patriarchs of the Holy Sees, Constantinople, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Alexandria, and it is received by the vast majority consensus of the faithful. Pope John was the pope at the time who sent legates to fully endorse the council by the papacy. Roman Catholic historian Francis Dvornik maintains that the pope accepted this council as well. I do want to note that this is a disputed topic upon reception within Roman Catholicism. It is not my intent to misrepresent or offend my brothers and sisters regarding this. So please forgive me if I have caused offense to you. It is my intent to maintain the truth of the ecumenical synods. I'm sure Catholics have their own articles on such a topic. Please read them and compare and decide for yourself. I believe you will find that orthodoxy is consistent in the truth. May Christ be with us all.